From once thriving industrial giants to hollowed-out city centers plagued by poverty, crime, and mass exodus, these American cities were built on dreams and are now struggling to survive. This isn't just urban decline, it's a warning. Crumbling infrastructure, vanishing populations, and economic collapse are tearing these places apart. In this video, we're counting down the 10 fastest dying cities in America, backed by real data and hard statistics you won't believe. These aren't just headlines. This is the reality of millions of Americans. What happened to these cities? Why are people leaving? And can they ever recover? Number 10. Jackson, Mississippi. Once known as the city with soul, Jackson, Mississippi now tells a much different story. One of deep economic decline, decaying infrastructure, and a rapidly shrinking population. In 1980, Jackson's population peaked at just over 200,000 residents. Today, that number has fallen to around 146,000, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, a staggering 27% drop over 4 decades. But Jackson's crisis isn't just about population loss, it's about basic survival. In 2022, the city's water system completely failed, leaving over 150,000 residents without reliable access to clean drinking water for weeks. The EPA called Jackson's water infrastructure in crisis after decades of underinvestment and mismanagement. And it's not just water. Jackson now consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities in the United States. In 2021, it had the highest per capita murder rate in the country, surpassing even Chicago and St. Louis. With a declining tax base, schools and public services are underfunded. Roads crumble, businesses leave, and those who can afford to move elsewhere. More than 25% of Jackson's population now lives below the poverty line, nearly double the national average. And with nearly 1 in every 5 homes vacant, entire neighborhoods are being swallowed by urban decay. Jackson is more than statistics. It's a city of people fighting to survive in a system that seems to be falling apart around them. Number 9. Shreveport, Louisiana. Welcome to Shreveport, Louisiana, a city once fueled by oil, casinos, and the promise of Southern opportunity. Today, that promise is fading fast. Back in 1980, Shreveport's population hovered around 205,000 people. Today, it's fallen to approximately 181,000, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. That's a drop of nearly 12%, and the downward trend is accelerating. But this isn't just about numbers. This is about what happens when jobs disappear, investment dries up, and hope slowly drains from a city's core. Since the early 2000s, Shreveport has lost thousands of manufacturing and oil-related jobs, once the backbone of its local economy. In 2023, the Brookings Institution named Shreveport one of the most distressed small metros in America, citing high poverty, unemployment, and weak job growth. Crime is also a growing concern. In 2021, Shreveport was ranked among the top 25 most dangerous cities in America, with violent crime rates more than double the national average. The city's public school system is shrinking, tax revenues are falling, and those who can leave are. According to a 2024 report from the U.S. Census Bureau, Shreveport lost over 5,000 residents in just 3 years. Infrastructure is aging and underfunded. In 2023, a state audit revealed that nearly $1 billion in infrastructure upgrades would be needed over the next decade to prevent system failures. From a once proud oil city to one of the most economically distressed places in the South, Shreveport is fighting a quiet war against time, poverty, and neglect. Number 8. Youngstown, Ohio. Once a symbol of American industrial might, Youngstown, Ohio was built on steel, labor, and grit. Today, it's one of the clearest examples of what happens when an entire city's foundation disappears. In the 1950s, Youngstown's population reached nearly 170,000. It was booming, home to dozens of steel plants and a thriving working class. But in 1977, it all started to fall apart. That year, known as Black Monday, the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company announced massive closures, laying off over 5,000 workers in a single day. Within a generation, the steel industry that defined Youngstown had vanished. The city's population collapsed to just over 60,000 today, a loss of more than 60% from its peak. Between 2010 and 2020 alone, the city lost 7.81% of its population, among the highest rates of urban shrinkage in the country. Nearly 1 in 5 homes in Youngstown is vacant or abandoned, according to a 2022 housing report, and the poverty rate hovers near 35%, almost triple the national average. City leaders have tried revitalization projects, from downtown arts districts to small business grants, but progress is painfully slow. For every new opening, there are 5 more closures. Today, Youngstown stands as a powerful symbol of the Rust Belt's fall from grace, not because it failed, but because it was abandoned by the very industries that made it. Number 7. Gary, Indiana. If there's one city that embodies the collapse of America's industrial heartland, it's Gary, Indiana. Founded in 1906 by U.S. Steel, Gary was once one of the most productive steel cities in the world. At its peak in 1960, over 178,000 people lived here, almost all of them tied to the steel industry. But when steel collapsed in the 1970s and 80s, Gary fell with it. Today, the population has plummeted to just 66,583. That's a 62% loss in just 6 decades. Abandonment is everywhere. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, 1/3 of all housing units in Gary are vacant, one of the highest rates in the country. Schools have closed, hospitals have shuttered, and many blocks are eerily silent, entire neighborhoods without a single resident. Gary has also struggled with violent crime for decades. In 2021, it had a murder rate more than 7 times the national average, according to FBI crime data. Local officials are trying. New development incentives, downtown revitalization plans, and solar energy projects are underway. But Gary's challenges remain immense. Number 6. Flint, Michigan. Few cities in America are as deeply associated with collapse as Flint, Michigan. Once the beating heart of General Motors, Flint was a model of the American dream. Good wages, strong unions, and stable communities. In the 1960s, Flint's population peaked at nearly 200,000. But since then, the city has lost over 100,000 residents. Today, just 79,854 remain. That's a staggering 60% population decline, one of the steepest in the country. Flint's downfall began in the 1980s as GM closed plant after plant, eliminating tens of thousands of jobs. The economic collapse triggered a wave of poverty, crime, and disinvestment that continues to this day. Flint's poverty rate now sits at 34.1%, more than double the national average. The median household income is just $35,215, less than half the national median. But Flint isn't just a story of economic collapse. It's the site of one of the worst public health disasters in modern U.S. history. In 2014, the city switched its water source to the Flint River to cut costs. Corrosive water wasn't properly treated, and lead leached into the water supply. An estimated 100,000 residents were exposed to contaminated water, including thousands of children. Multiple studies linked the water crisis to increased lead poisoning, Legionnaire's disease outbreaks, and irreversible damage to children's health. Federal and state investigations revealed massive governmental failures. In 2021, 9 former officials, including the former governor, were charged for their roles in the crisis. Today, Flint is still struggling to rebuild its infrastructure, trust, and future. Water lines are being replaced, But the damage, in many ways, is already done. Flint didn't just lose jobs, it lost faith in its institutions. Number 5. Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York was once a titan of American progress, a city at the crossroads of the Great Lakes and the Erie Canal, an industrial powerhouse with jobs, wealth, and cultural prestige. By 1950, Buffalo's population peaked at over 580,000. It was the 8th largest city in the United States. But like so many cities in the Rust Belt, Buffalo's decline was slow, painful, and relentless. Deindustrialization in the 1960s and 70s gutted the city's job base. Shipping routes bypassed Buffalo after the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway. Steel plants and car factories closed, and the people began to leave. Today, Buffalo's population is down to just 276,486, according to the 2023 U.S. Census estimates. That's more than a 52% population loss, a city literally cut in half. Buffalo has one of the highest housing vacancy rates in the Northeast, with more than 15,000 vacant properties as of 2023, according to the City of Buffalo Vacant Property Report. And poverty remains a serious issue. Over 27% of residents live below the poverty line, compared to the national average of around 11%. Buffalo is also plagued by harsh winters and massive snowfalls, earning it a reputation as one of the most difficult places to live weather-wise in America. In 2022, a historic blizzard killed 39 people in a single weekend. Despite major investments in downtown Buffalo and a budding tech and medical corridor, the city's east side remains deeply neglected, riddled with food deserts, crime, and economic despair. And in 2022, Buffalo was shaken by a racially motivated mass shooting at a supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood, a horrifying reminder of how deep the city's divides run. Buffalo is a city of contrasts, revival in some areas, deep decline in others. For all its potential, the scars of the past are still wide open. Number 4. Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore, Maryland, a city once known for its maritime legacy, industrial might, and working-class resilience, has become a national symbol of urban decline, inequality, and lost potential. Once home to over 950,000 residents in 1950, Baltimore was the 6th largest city in the United States. But today, that number has plunged to just 563,374. Across the city, there are over 15,000 vacant homes, many of them clustered in the city's predominantly black neighborhoods. Baltimore's decline is deeply tied to decades of deindustrialization, racial segregation, redlining, and corruption, and the effects are visible on nearly every corner. The city's poverty rate hovers around 21.4%, while the median household income is just $56,900, well below the national average. Baltimore has long struggled with crime and drug addiction. In 2023, the city recorded 335 homicides, making it one of the highest per capita murder rates in the country, again. It has been ranked among the most dangerous cities in America for years. And the damage hasn't just come from crime in the streets, but from corruption within the system. The infamous Gun Trace Task Force scandal, involving police officers robbing citizens, planting evidence, and reselling seized drugs, rocked the city in 2017. The city paid out over $15 million in legal settlements related to police misconduct just between 2015 and 2020. The 2015 death of Freddie Gray, a 25-year-old black man who died in police custody, sparked mass protests and unrest that further exposed the city's systemic failures. Trust in institutions collapsed, and the scars from that moment still linger across Baltimore. Today, revitalization efforts are underway, particularly near the harbor, the University Corridor, and biotech districts. But the divide between prosperity and poverty remains stark. In a 2022 study, Baltimore was ranked the U.S. city with the highest level of racial economic inequality. Number 3. Detroit, Michigan. Once called the Motor City, now called a cautionary tale. Detroit, Michigan was the beating heart of America's Industrial Revolution. Home of Ford, GM, and Chrysler, Detroit built the middle class. It built modern America. In 1950, Detroit had nearly 1.85 million residents, making it the fourth largest city in the U.S. But after decades of automation, outsourcing, racial unrest, and political dysfunction, Detroit has seen one of the worst urban collapses in American history. As of 2023, Detroit's population has shrunk to 631,366. That's a 66% population loss, nearly 1.2 million people gone. Entire neighborhoods have been abandoned. According to city data, there are more than 19,000 vacant homes and an estimated 90,000 empty lots. In 2013, Detroit made history, becoming the largest U.S. city ever to file for bankruptcy, with over $18 billion in debt. The bankruptcy meant slashed services, closed schools, a gutted police force, and pension cuts for thousands of city workers. Detroit continues to face a severe crime problem. In 2022, the city had the second highest violent crime rate in the U.S., with over 2,200 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. Despite billions in federal and private investment, the majority of Detroit residents, especially on the east and west sides, see little change. The poverty rate remains staggeringly high at 30.6%, and the median household income is just $37,500, nearly half the national average. Yes, downtown Detroit is seeing investment, sports arenas, tech companies, and boutique hotels. But 10 minutes away, schools are shut, homes are burned out, and grocery stores are gone. Detroit is a city that once symbolized the American dream. Now it's a stark reminder of what happens when industry leaves, and no one steps in to replace it. Number 2. Cleveland, Ohio. Once hailed as the city of innovation and industrial might, home to Rockefeller, Standard Oil, and America's first billion-dollar corporation, Cleveland has since become a symbol of Rust Belt collapse, urban decay, and broken promises. At its peak in 1950, Cleveland's population was over 914,000, the seventh largest city in the United States. But since then, the city has lost over half its residents. As of 2023, Cleveland's population stands at just 361,607. That's a staggering 60% population decline in just over 70 years. Entire blocks are vacant. According to a 2022 city audit, Cleveland has more than 25,000 vacant and abandoned properties. In some East Side neighborhoods, the vacancy rate exceeds 30%. The economic fallout has been brutal. Cleveland now has the highest poverty rate of any large U.S. city, with over 30.8% of residents living in poverty and more than 46% of children affected. Jobs left, and the investment never returned. Many neighborhoods, particularly those with predominantly black populations, were devastated by decades of redlining, deindustrialization, and disinvestment. The median household income in Cleveland is just $37,200, less than half the national median. And despite modest improvements, crime remains a serious issue. In 2022, Cleveland reported 1,600 violent crimes per 100,000 residents, one of the highest rates in the country. Aging infrastructure is another crisis. Thousands of homes still contain lead pipes, and Cleveland has been identified by the NRDC as one of the most at-risk cities for childhood lead exposure. To be fair, some parts of Cleveland are bouncing back. The downtown, the Flats, and University Circle have seen pockets of growth and investment. But these revitalized zones feel like islands surrounded by decades of abandonment. Cleveland was once one of the richest, most powerful cities in the United States. Now, despite its resilience, it stands as one of the most distressed and unequal urban centers in America. Number 1. St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, Missouri, once a thriving hub of commerce, culture, and industry, now stands as the fastest dying major city in America. At its peak in 1950, St. Louis was home to nearly 856,000 residents. Today, that number has plummeted to approximately 298,000. That's a staggering 65% population loss over the past 7 decades. St. Louis struggles with one of the highest rates of vacant properties in the nation. Over 16,000 abandoned homes litter the city. Nearly 30% of St. Louis residents live below the poverty line, with some neighborhoods experiencing child poverty rates exceeding 50%. Crime rates in St. Louis are among the highest in the country. The city's violent crime rate topped 2,400 incidents per 100,000 people in 2023, making it the most dangerous large city in America. Decades of economic disinvestment, white flight, segregation, and political corruption have hollowed out the city. The city's median household income is around $44,200, far below the national median. St. Louis faces significant challenges with aging infrastructure, underfunded schools, and limited public transportation options. While grassroots organizations and some redevelopment efforts work tirelessly to revive St. Louis, the pace of decline remains daunting. St. Louis stands today as a stark reminder of what happens when a once great city faces decades of neglect and systemic failure. It is a city fighting for its survival.